Welcome to this tutorial for TMS 3715, Teaching Home Languages in the FET. Your lecturer for this module is myself, Dr. D. Sanders. My email address is esandard@unisa.ac.za. Please feel free to email me if you have any queries, questions, or comments. For today, we're going to be discussing Learning Unit 3, Part 3, Teaching Home Languages in FET. This is found at pages 47 to 83, Tutorial Letter 501. Planning for language lessons. Lesson planning is a vital component of the teaching learning process. Planning a lesson keeps the teacher systematic and orderly in the treatment of the subject matter. Teacher sets forth some definite aims in mind and is conscious of the interest and attitudes that are to develop in the learners through certain activities or other means. A lesson plan is developed by a teacher to guide instruction throughout the day. It is a method of planning and preparation. A lesson plan helps the teacher both planning and executing the lesson. It helps the learners indirectly by ensuring that they receive an actual lesson with a beginning, a middle, and an end. It aims to help them learn something specific that they did not know at the beginning of the lesson, or practice and make progress in that specific thing. The lesson planning. Planning for lessons. To summarize, lesson plan is the teacher's guide for teaching a particular lesson, and it includes the objective, what the learners are supposed to learn, how the objective will be reached, the method, procedure, and a way of measuring how well the objective was reached, test, worksheet, homework, etc. A successful lesson plan addresses and integrates three key components: learning objectives, learning activities, and assessment to check for learner understanding. Writing learning objectives for language lessons in FET-HL. Before you plan your lesson, you will first need to identify the learning objectives for the lesson. A learning objective answers the question what it is that your learners should be able to do at the end of the class session that they could not do before. A learning objective makes clear the intended learning outcome rather than what form the instruction will take. Learning objectives focus on learner performance. Typically, they are written in a language that is easily understood by learners, clearly related to the phase learning outcomes. Writing learning objectives for language lessons in FET-HL. The learning objectives should be SMART. S for specific, says exactly what the learner will be able to do. M, measurable, can be observed by the end of the lesson. A, attainable, for the learners within a scheduled time and specific conditions. R, relevant to the needs of the learner. And T, time-framed, achievable by the end of the lesson. Those are your SMART goals for your language lessons when writing your objectives. Steps for writing learning objectives. According to Lewis, there are 3 steps to take when writing objectives. Step 1, learning objectives begin with a phrase. By the end of the lesson, learners will be able to. Step 2, connect step 1 with an action verb, which communicates the performance by the learner. Use verbs which describe an action that can be observed and that is measurable within the teaching time frame. Step 3, conclude with the specifics, what the learner will be doing when demonstrating achievement or mastery of the objectives. stresses that which the learner will walk away with from the lesson activity. Task 1. In your own words, explain the importance of writing lesson objectives for language lessons and the steps you will take to write these actual objectives. Please discuss with your fellow students. Bloom's taxonomy. Bloom's taxonomy, I'm sure you're all familiar with, is used to write the verb to describe the action, the performance that you want the learners to be able to do at the end of the lesson. Bloom's taxonomy is a hierarchical ordering of cognitive skills that can guide teaching and learning in a language lesson. There are 6 levels in Bloom's taxonomy: knowledge, comprehension, application, analysis, synthesis, and evaluation. Knowledge. When using the knowledge level in writing your objectives, you could use verbs such as recall, identify, recognize, acquire, distinguish, state, define, name, list, label, reproduce, order, to name just a few. That's for your knowledge level. For the comprehension level, you could use verbs such as translate, extrapolate, convert, interpret, abstract, transform, select, indicate, illustrate, represent, formulate, explain, classify, comprehend. When using the application level to write your objectives, you could use verbs such as apply, sequence, carry out, solve, prepare, operate, generalize, plan, repair, explain, predict, demonstrate, instruct, compute, use, perform, implement, employ, solve. Analysis. We could use verbs such as analyze, estimate, compare, observe, detect, classify, discover, discriminate, explore, distinguish, catalog, investigate, break down, order, determine, differentiate, dissect, contrast, examine, interpret, just to name a few. And synthesis. You could use verbs such as write, plan, integrate, formulate, propose, specify, produce, organize, theorize, design, build, systematize, combine, summarize, restate, argue, discuss, derive, relate, generalize, conclude, or produce. And finally, evaluation. We could use verbs such as evaluate, verify, assess, to test, judge, rank, measure, appraise, select, check, judge, justify, evaluate, determine, support, defend, criticize, weigh, assess. Those are the 6 different levels of Bloom's taxonomy: knowledge, comprehension, application, analysis, synthesis, and evaluation. Task 2. Name the levels of Bloom's taxonomy, and using each of the levels, give an example of a question you could use in your language classroom. Please share your ideas with your fellow students. There are 2 types of learning objectives in language teaching. Firstly, skills objectives. These focus on the development of the 4 basic language pillars, namely speaking, reading, writing, listening, and grammar. These enable the learners to analyze the element of language and establish the appropriate relationship among linguistic components. Those are your skills objectives. Your cognitive objectives. These focus on knowing conceptualizing, comprehending, applying, synthesizing, and evaluating. These deal with learners' knowledge of the subject matter, how learners demonstrate this knowledge. Overall, cognitive objectives focus on guiding the learners in acquiring knowledge, diagnosing weakness in speaking and writing, comparing and illustrating linguistic components, classifying the elements of a language, understanding the meaning of prose, poetry, story, and drama by reading. Those are your cognitive objectives. Task 3. Explain the difference between a skills objective and a cognitive objective. Please discuss with your fellow students. Our thinking stop for this lesson. When you were a learner and asked to answer various comprehension questions, were the various levels of Bloom's taxonomy used? Please share your views on this discussion forum. Comment on the post of the other members of our group. Super job. Well done. You've completed the third part of Learning Unit 3, Teaching Home Languages in the FET. Thank you for joining this tutorial.